During the holiday gathering, my father stared directly at me and declared I should find myself living on the pavement. Everyone around that table anticipated my collapse, but instead I offered them a serene smile because they remained oblivious to the fact that my earnings had reached $25 million in the previous 12 months. They were equally unaware that my identity had been attached to an obligation I never authorized. 3 weeks afterward, when they appeared at my doorstep desperate for conversation, they encountered no mercy. They discovered only the frigid, documented, and irrefutable reality. My name is Reverie Ashford, and throughout the past decade, I have mastered the craft of remaining invisible while positioned in full view. I had reached 34 years of age, perched at the distant edge of a mahogany dining surface that exceeded the value of my inaugural automobile, encircled by individuals who possessed my genetic makeup, but shared nothing of my existence. It was Thanksgiving in the outskirts of Savannah, Georgia, a locale where the grass is trimmed with surgical accuracy and domestic secrets are interred just near enough to the surface to contaminate the soil. The dining area represented a textbook demonstration of manufactured contentment. My mother, Cordelia, had surpassed herself with the arrangements. There were slender candles ablaze in silver bases, projecting a wavering amber illumination over the bronze turkey that rested like a ritual sacrifice at the table's center. The atmosphere carried notes of sage, butter, and the unmistakable cloying fragrance of expensive perfume, mingled with unvoiced condemnation. Mounted photographs adorned the mantel positioned behind my father's head, a gallery of victories. There was Vivienne claiming a beauty competition, Vivienne completing her fashion education, Vivienne severing the ribbon at her inaugural boutique. There existed no images of me. I had long since acknowledged that in the Museum of the Ashford family heritage, I failed to register even as a notation. I was an error they preferred to disregard. I occupied the periphery, the seat typically designated for the unexpected visitor or the distant relative, despite being the firstborn daughter. To my left sat my Aunt Harriet, who persistently inquired whether I remained unattached with the apprehension one typically reserves for a terminal prognosis. To my right stretched an unoccupied gap where the atmosphere felt notably colder. At the table's head resided my father, Preston Ashford. He was an individual who donned his authority like protective armor, rigid and impenetrable. He was dissecting the turkey with surgical concentration, the silver blade slicing through the flesh with a moist, decisive resonance that appeared to reverberate in the abrupt quietude of the chamber. The discussion had been navigating the secure harbors of meteorology and regional athletics. But I could perceive the current shifting. Preston harbored no affection for secure harbors. He favored turbulent waters where he could demonstrate he was the sole captain capable of navigating the vessel. He deposited the carving implement, wiped his palms on a linen serviette, and surveyed the length of the table. His gaze bypassed the steaming accompaniments of green bean casserole and candied yams, bypassed my mother, bypassed Vivienne, and settled directly upon me. It was the expression of a hunter detecting a weakness. "So, Reverie," he announced, his voice resonating enough to penetrate the living area where the football broadcast was murmuring. "We have received scant updates from you recently. What occupies your time these days? Still tinkering with those electronic devices?" The gathering fell mute. Utensils halted midway to mouths. My mother, Cordelia, immediately commenced smoothing the napkin in her lap, her digits working the material with anxious energy. She avoided my gaze. She fixed her attention on the centerpiece, presumably imploring that I would utter nothing to embarrass the clan. In the Ashford residence, transgression was pardonable, but embarrassment constituted a capital offense. I consumed a measured sip of water, sensing the ice contact my teeth. "I operate a systems integration enterprise," I replied softly. "It maintains my schedule." It represented the truth, but it was a truth so diminished it bordered on fabrication. I neglected to mention that my firm, Prism Logic Systems, had recently transformed supply chain operations for 3 Fortune 500 corporations. I neglected to mention that my secondary enterprise, Harbor Point Technologies, had been acquired in a confidential transaction that reconstructed my entire financial reality. To them, I remained merely Reverie, the one who tinkered, the one who failed to conform to the template of Southern belle perfection. Preston chuckled, a parched, humorless sound. Systems integration. That sounds like an elaborate term for technical support. He surveyed the table, inviting the others to participate in his amusement. I trust it covers the rent. You understand, in this economy, you cannot simply drift indefinitely. I tightened my grip on the fork, the metal pressing into my palm. I am managing adequately, Father, I responded. Vivian, who was positioned to his right, swirled the Pinot Noir in her crystal goblet. She appeared radiant. I had to concede that point. Her hair cascaded in perfect blonde waves, her complexion emanating the variety of vitality that requires a fortune to sustain. She was the favored child, the one who had adhered to the manuscript. She inclined forward, her bracelets chiming softly. "Oh, regarding business matters, Daddy, did I inform you about the expansion?" she inquired, her voice saccharine and luminous. She understood precisely what she was accomplishing. She was redirecting the spotlight toward herself, but in executing this, she was projecting an extended shadow over me. Preston's expression softened instantaneously. "Inform us, darling, regarding the boutique." "Indeed," Vivian radiated. "Vivian's Atelier Bridal is officially evaluating a second location in the Metropolitan Center. We are inundated with orders. The demand for my custom lace creations is simply overwhelming. I might even require a new manager merely to handle the overflow." "That is my daughter," Preston declared, elevating his glass. "Observe, that is what ambition resembles. Constructing something tangible, something you can physically touch, not merely staring at screens throughout the day." Cordelia finally raised her gaze, smiling at Vivian with a combination of relief and pride. "We are so proud of you, Viv. You possess such a gift." The praise cascaded over the table, warm and excluding. I sat there sectioning a portion of turkey into progressively smaller fragments, analyzing the geometry of the meat, so I would not be compelled to observe their expressions. I understood the reality about Vivian's boutique because I understood how to interpret market indicators, and I recognized the bridal industry in Savannah was oversaturated. I had examined the reviews online, complaints regarding delayed shipments and escalating costs. But here at this table, facts held no significance. Only the narrative held significance, and the narrative dictated that Vivian was the celestial body and I was the void. Then, Preston redirected his attention to me. The contrast was calculated. He intended everyone, Aunt Harriet, Uncle Theodore, the cousins, to perceive the distinction. "You could acquire valuable lessons from your sister, Reverie," he proclaimed. He retrieved his wine goblet but abstained from drinking. He merely grasped it, swirling the crimson liquid. "You have reached 34 years of age. By your age, I possessed a mortgage, 2 offspring, and a partnership in the firm. You are renting a condominium. You have no husband, and you are evasive about your occupation. It distresses your mother." Cordelia neither confirmed nor contradicted this. She merely consumed a modest portion of stuffing, her gaze anchored on her plate. "I am content, Father," I declared, maintaining my voice level. "My existence is different, but it functions for me." "Different," Preston scoffed. "Different is what individuals proclaim when they are failing, but refuse to acknowledge it. Listen, I am going to be candid with you, because I am your father. We are exhausted from speculating whether you will contact us requesting financial assistance. I experienced a frigid surge of heat ascending my neck. "I have never requested financial assistance from you," I stated. "Not once. Not since I reached 18. "Not yet," Preston amended. "But it is imminent. I can detect it." "You lack a foundation, Reverie. You are adrift, and individuals who drift eventually sink." The chamber had become deathly silent now. The solitary sound was the grandfather clock marking time in the corridor, tabulating the seconds of my humiliation. I attempted to disengage. "I believe we should simply appreciate the meal," I offered. "No, I believe we should establish clarity," Preston declared, his voice ascending. He inclined forward, his countenance hardening into a mask of contempt. "I have sustained this clan on my shoulders for 40 years. I constructed a reputation. Vivian is augmenting that reputation. You constitute a question mark, and I harbor no affection for question marks." He paused, permitting the tension to extend until it was nearly insufferable. Then he delivered the pronouncement he had evidently been rehearsing in his thoughts throughout the afternoon. "If you cannot sustain yourself, Reverie, then do not approach us weeping. If you fail, you find yourself on the pavement, because I am finished supporting dead weight." The words suspended in the atmosphere, violent and absolute. Find yourself on the pavement. I observed him. I observed the man who had instructed me in bicycle riding. The man who had once inspected beneath my bed for monsters, now regarding me as though I were the monster. I observed Cordelia, anticipating her intervention to declare, "Preston, that is sufficient." But she merely reached for her wine goblet, her hand trembling slightly. She was selecting her tranquility over my dignity. I observed Vivian, and I detected a faint smirk tugging at the corner of her impeccably lined lips. She was relishing this. She was prevailing. And for Vivian, prevailing was the only element that rendered a meal palatable. They were anticipating my breakdown. They were anticipating the tears, the shouting, the defensive spectacle that would confirm I was precisely the emotional catastrophe they alleged I was. They desired a reaction, so they could declare, "Observe, she is unstable." I consumed a deep breath. I inhaled the aroma of sage and hypocrisy, and then I exhaled. I did not scream. I did not overturn the table. I simply positioned my fork and knife parallel on my plate, the universal indication that I had concluded. I retrieved my linen serviette, folded it precisely into a square, and positioned it to the left of my setting. "Thank you for the meal, Cordelia," I declared. The turkey was exceptional. I withdrew my chair, the legs scraping against the hardwood flooring, a harsh sound that caused Aunt Harriet to flinch. I rose, smoothing the front of my dress. I met Preston's gaze directly. He appeared surprised, perhaps disappointed that I had not provided him the confrontation he sought. "I will see myself out," I declared. I rotated and departed. I proceeded past the grandfather clock, past the gallery of Vivian's accomplishments, past the front entrance with its festive wreath. I retrieved my coat from the rack and emerged into the biting November atmosphere. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing them within their warm, delusional enclosure. My vehicle was stationed at the driveway's terminus, a black sedan that appeared modest enough to blend in, but possessed an engine constructed for performance, much like me. I unlocked the door and settled into the driver's seat. The leather was frigid against my back. I remained there momentarily in the silence, perceiving the resonance in my ears. "Find yourself on the pavement." The phrase cycled repeatedly in my consciousness. It was laughable. It was absurd, but it still inflicted pain, like a paper laceration doused in citrus juice. It was not the financial threat that stung. I possessed sufficient liquidity to acquire this entire neighborhood if I desired. It was the complete, absolute absence of faith. It was the realization that to them I was worthless unless I was reflected in their mirror. I extracted my phone from my purse. The screen illuminated the dark interior of the vehicle. There were 3 notifications from my chief financial officer, and a weekly summary report from the automated dashboard of Prism Logic. I unlocked the phone and opened the banking application that I kept concealed in a folder labeled Utilities. The figures stared back at me, crisp and comforting. Net income year to date, $480,000. I scrolled downward. My liquid assets alone were positioned at 8 figures. The acquisition of Harbor Point Technologies had concluded 2 weeks prior, depositing a lump sum that most individuals would require 10 lifetimes to accumulate. I was not merely solvent. I was wealthy in a manner my father could not even comprehend with his local legal practice and his country club memberships. I tapped on the team communication application. A message from my lead developer appeared. "Reverie, the beta evaluation for the new logistics algorithm is at 99% efficiency. We are prepared to launch on Monday." I typed a swift reply. "Exceptional work. Proceed." I deposited the phone on the passenger seat, and through the windshield I could perceive the glow of the dining room window. I could discern the silhouettes of my family, still consuming, still conversing. They were probably dissecting my departure at this moment. Preston was probably declaring, "Observe. She fled. She cannot handle the reality." Vivian was probably pouring another goblet of wine, relieved that the competition had removed itself from the arena. They possessed no awareness. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles whitening. I experienced a peculiar sense of clarity wash over me. For years, I had been presenting my achievements at their doorstep, like a feline delivering a deceased rodent, hoping for acknowledgement. I had desired them to perceive me. I had desired them to be proud. But tonight, as the engine hummed to life, I realized that I was finished. The transaction was concluded. I no longer require them to comprehend. I whispered to the vacant vehicle. I shifted the gear into reverse, prepared to withdraw from their driveway and from their existence. I was going to return to my high-rise condominium in the city, pour myself a measure of scotch that exceeded the value of their Thanksgiving turkey, and continue constructing my empire. I was liberated, or so I believed. What I did not comprehend as I departed from that residence with its perfect lawn and its poisoned dinner table was that the severance package was not going to be that simple. I did not comprehend that while I was verifying my $25 million balance, a file was resting in a drawer in my father's study with my name inscribed upon it. I did not comprehend that 3 weeks prior, a pen had traversed a piece of paper tracing the loops and curves of a signature that resembled mine, but was not. They had instructed me to find myself on the pavement. It was a cruel insult, a disposable phrase intended to assert dominance, but they had already undertaken measures to render it a reality. They had leveraged my name against an obligation that was deteriorating from within. They assumed I was a helpless young woman who would return crawling when the world became too difficult. They possessed no awareness that they had just declared war on a woman who had the ammunition to incinerate their entire kingdom to ashes. I turned onto the main thoroughfare, the headlights cutting through the darkness. I increased the radio volume to drown out the memory of my father's voice, unaware that the genuine noise was merely commencing. The countdown had initiated. Not for me, but for them. And unlike their insults, the approaching storm was going to be documented, notarized, and utterly irreversible. The journey from my parents' residence to my condominium in metropolitan Savannah typically consumed 40 minutes. But tonight it felt as though I was traversing a century of history. The highway extended before me, a ribbon of concrete illuminated by the sterile glow of streetlights. But my consciousness was not on the road. It was traveling back to the source of the decay, back to the rooms and corridors where the script for tonight's disaster had been composed decades ago. To comprehend why my father felt comfortable instructing me to exist on the pavement, you must comprehend the architecture of the Ashford family. It was not constructed on love. It was constructed on image. From the moment I was sufficiently mature to grasp a screwdriver, I recognized I was a structural defect in their meticulously designed blueprint. I had reached 10 years of age when the division became a chasm. While other girls in my 4th grade class were requesting dolls or pony rides, I was consumed with the mechanics of how things functioned. I remember extracting an old discarded toaster from the neighbor's refuse bin and transporting it into our garage. I devoted 3 hours to disassembling it, categorizing the fasteners, cleaning the heating elements, and marveling at the simple logic of the circuitry. I was covered in grease and residue, my fingernails black with grime. But I experienced a profound sense of serenity. The machine made sense. If a wire was connected, it functioned. If it was damaged, you repaired it. My father discovered me there. I anticipated he would be impressed. I desired to demonstrate to him that I had repaired the spring mechanism. Instead, he regarded me with a combination of confusion and distaste that I would come to recognize better than my own reflection. "Reverie," he had declared, his voice constricted. "Proceed inside and cleanse yourself. You resemble a mechanic." That is not how an Ashford presents herself to the world. He did not inquire if I had repaired it. He did not care about the function. He only cared about the aesthetic. That was the commencement. While I was immersing myself in textbooks on coding languages and physics, my younger sister, Vivienne, was mastering the art of being delightful. Vivienne was the child they had ordered from the catalog. She was blonde, effervescent, and instinctively comprehended that her function was to reflect our parents' vanity back at them. When she twirled in a new dress, my mother, Cordelia, would clap her hands together and radiate. When she struggled with basic mathematics, my father would chuckle and declare it was charming because she would never need to concern herself with numbers with a husband to look after her. I, on the other hand, was the problem that required solving. I was the dark cloud on their sunny horizon. The toxicity in our residence was not loud. It was not the variety of abuse you witness in films with thrown plates and screaming confrontations. It was quieter, more insidious. It was a slow suffocation. Cordelia was the master of the silent critique. She never raised her voice. She simply utilized silence as a weapon. If I came downstairs wearing a t-shirt that she deemed unladylike, she would not yell. She would just sigh, a long, weary exhalation, and regard my father with eyes that communicated, "Observe what I must deal with." Then she would refuse to make eye contact with me for the remainder of the morning. I learned rapidly that in the Ashford household, affection was a currency, and I was perpetually bankrupt. By the time I was in high school, the roles were cast in stone. Vivienne was the golden child, the one destined to marry well and maintain the family name polished in the social circles of our church and country club. I was the scapegoat, the eccentric, the one who was tolerated but never celebrated. I remember the day I claimed the state coding championship. I had reached 16. I had devoted months staying up until 2 a.m, writing lines of code until my eyes burned, constructing a program that optimized traffic signal patterns. I transported the trophy home, a heavy plastic obelisk with gold lettering. I positioned it on the kitchen island, my heart hammering against my ribs, waiting for the validation I was starving for. Preston walked in, glanced at the trophy, and then regarded the mail in his hand. "That is pleasant reverie," he declared without stopping. "Ensure you move it before dinner. Your mother requires the counter space for the floral arrangements. The pastor is visiting tonight. That was it. That is pleasant. Move it." 10 minutes later, Vivienne rushed in, breathless, grasping a shopping bag. She had located the perfect sash for her choir robe. Cordelia and Preston halted everything. They gathered around her, touching the fabric, discussing the shade of blue, praising her eye for color. They devoted 20 minutes celebrating a piece of fabric while my state championship trophy sat like a paperweight, invisible and obstructing the view. It was in that moment, standing in the shadow of their adoration for Vivienne, that I realized the truth. They did not ignore me because I was failing. They ignored me because my success did not serve their narrative. They required me to be the failure. Every family system like ours requires a baseline, a contrast. For Vivienne to be the shining star, someone had to be the dark night sky. For Preston to be the benevolent patriarch, someone had to be the wayward child he was constantly attempting to save. If I was successful, if I was brilliant, if I was independent, then their pity was misplaced. And they loved their pity. They wore it like a badge of honor. Oh, poor Reverie. She is simply so lost, they would inform the neighbors, shaking their heads. We pray for her every day. So, I ceased attempting to make them perceive me. I started constructing a life they could not touch. I departed home the day after I reached 18. I did not request their assistance, and they did not offer it. While they financed Vivienne's fully furnished apartment near her fashion design school, complete with a monthly allowance that exceeded most individuals' salaries, I relocated into a basement studio in a questionable section of town. The walls carried the scent of damp earth, and the radiator clanked like a dying engine. But it was mine. I worked the graveyard shift at a data center, monitoring servers while the rest of the city slumbered. I attended university on a full academic scholarship that I had applied for without my parents' knowledge. When I informed them I received a full ride, Preston had frowned and inquired if it was a vocational school. He could not conceive that his difficult daughter was exceeding his expectations. Those years were brutal, but they forged me. I learned the value of $1 when I had to select between purchasing textbooks or purchasing heat. I learned how to navigate corporate politics by observing the manner managers claimed credit for my code. I learned that the only individual who was ever going to save Reverie Ashford was Reverie Ashford. But the most painful element was not the poverty or the exhaustion. It was the visits home. I would return for holidays, driven by that biological imperative that compels us to seek out our tribe, even when the tribe is poisonous. And every occasion I returned, I witnessed the mechanism at work. Vivian would be there glowing with her latest subsidized success. She would discuss her business, which was essentially a hobby funded by Preston's bank account. She would complain about how challenging it was to locate quality help, or how stressful it was to plan a gala. And I would sit there exhausted from working 80-hour weeks constructing my own legitimate company, and I would say nothing. When I attempted to share my life, it was filtered through their lens of disappointment. I was promoted to senior systems architect, I informed them once over Easter brunch. Preston had merely nodded, chewing his ham. That is with computers, correct? Just ensure you are not staring at screens until your eyes deteriorate. No man desires a wife who resembles a librarian, Cordelia had added. Vivian is dating a lovely young man from the bank. Perhaps he has a friend for you, although you might want to do something about your hair first. It is so severe. They reduced my career, my passion, and my intellect to a barrier preventing me from locating a husband. They could not celebrate me because I was winning a race they did not believe in. Gradually, I learned to perform the part they wrote for me. It was easier. It caused less friction. If I appeared looking tired, they were satisfied. If I was vague about my finances, they assumed I was struggling, and that made them feel secure. They required believing I was one step away from disaster so they could feel superior. Poor Reverie. She tries, but she simply does not possess the knack for life. I permitted them to have that. I permitted them to believe I was scraping by. I permitted them to believe my little computer job was barely keeping the lights on. It was a protective camouflage. If they thought I possessed nothing, they would request nothing. Or so I believed. But as I drove through the darkness, placing miles between me and that Thanksgiving table, I realized I had made a critical error in my calculation. I thought that by performing the failure, I was protecting myself. I thought that by appearing weak, I was making myself of no value to them. I was wrong. In a family like mine, weakness is not a shield. It is an invitation. By permitting them to believe I was financially illiterate and desperate, I had made myself the perfect victim. They did not perceive a daughter who required support. They perceived a name they could utilize. They perceived a credit score they could exploit because, in their minds, I was too disorganized to notice, too beaten down to fight back. They assumed that because I had accepted their emotional scraps for 30 years, I would accept their financial abuse too. They thought the Reverie who sat silently at the edge of the table was the only Reverie that existed. They had forgotten the 10-year-old girl in the garage who understood how to dismantle things. They had forgotten the teenager who wrote code in the darkness. They had forgotten the woman who constructed 2 companies from the ground up while they were busy patting themselves on the back for being normal. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, pulling me out of my memories. It was an automated alert from my home security system, welcoming me back to my sanctuary. I took the exit toward the city center, the skyline rising up like a fortress of glass and steel. My building was the tallest one in the district, a testament to everything I had achieved without their assistance, without their approval, and without their money. I was finished performing the role of the disappointment. I was finished being the backdrop for Vivian's shine. Preston's voice echoed in my head one final time. Find yourself on the pavement. I gripped the steering wheel, my jaw setting into a hard line. I was not going to the pavement. I was going to war. But first, I required knowing exactly what they had done. I required seeing the wires they had crossed. And just like that toaster in the garage 24 years ago, I was going to dismantle their lies, fastener by fastener, until the whole dysfunction was laid bare on the floor. The sad little girl who desired her daddy to be proud was gone. The CEO was clocking in, and she was not in the business of forgiveness. The view from the 34th floor of my uptown Savannah condominium was a panorama of steel, glass, and ambition. From here, the city resembled a circuit board, a grid of illuminated pathways and energy nodes that made perfect logical sense. It was quiet up here. The variety of expensive silence that is filtered through triple-paned glass and central air conditioning systems designed to scrub the atmosphere of anything pedestrian. It was Sunday morning, 3 days after the Thanksgiving disaster. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, a mug of black coffee in my hand, observing the ant-sized vehicles crawling along the streets below. My father's voice was still a phantom echo in my head. Find yourself on the pavement. But up here, surrounded by the tangible evidence of my competence, his words lost their power. They became data noise, irrelevant outliers in a data set that trended overwhelmingly toward success. My apartment was not merely a living space. It was a command center. To my left, in the open concept office area, a bank of 4 monitors was currently displaying the live metrics of my empire. Most individuals assumed I repaired computers. The reality was that I owned Prism Logic Systems, a company that designed the nervous systems for smart warehouses. And then there was Harbor Point Technologies, my secondary venture focused on maritime logistics software. The family assumed I was scraping by, living paycheck to paycheck. They were unaware of the strategic acquisition I had concluded late last year. I had sold a proprietary piece of predictive code to a global shipping conglomerate. The net income from that single transaction after taxes and fees was $25 million. $25 million. I remembered the day the wire transfer arrived. I had stared at the screen for an hour, watching the number sit there, solid and unmoving. I had not purchased a Ferrari. I had not posted it on social media. I had simply paid off my condominium, diversified the portfolio into aggressive index funds and municipal bonds, and returned to work. Wealth for me was not about flash. It was about insulation. It was the wall that prevented the world from touching me. But the wall, I was beginning to realize, had a breach. My phone, resting on the marble kitchen island, buzzed. It was a single vibration, short and sharp. I walked over and retrieved it. The name on the screen was Emerson Prescott. Emerson was my cousin on my mother's side, and she was the only individual in the extended family tree who did not treat me like a contagious disease. Emerson was a nurse, practical and grounded, and she had long ago grown weary of the Ashford family theater. She typically only texted me to send memes or verify if I was still alive after holiday gatherings. This message was different. It was a block of text followed by a rolling eyes emoji. Just departed the second service at Providence Fellowship Church. You are the sermon topic again. Aunt Cordelia is requesting the prayer circle to pray for your housing situation. She informed Mrs. Garrison that you are essentially homeless and sleeping on a friend's sofa. She actually wept. Reverie. Genuine tears. I read the message twice. I experienced a cold, dry laugh bubble up in my chest. Homeless. Sleeping on a sofa. It was masterful in a twisted manner. My father had instructed me to find myself on the pavement on Thursday, and by Sunday, my mother had transformed that threat into a public fact. They were controlling the narrative by painting me as destitute. They were validating Preston's harshness. If I was truly failing, then his tough love was justified. It made him the concerned patriarch dealing with a delinquent child rather than a bully kicking his daughter when she was down. I typed back, "Permit them to pray. Perhaps it will assist my credit score." I hit send, intending to deposit the phone and go for a run, but the 3 dots of a reply appeared immediately. Emerson was not finished. "There is more," she wrote, "and you are not going to appreciate it." I heard Vivian conversing with Thatcher in the parking lot. They assumed I was already in my vehicle. My stomach tightened. Thatcher Brennan was Vivian's fiancé, a decent man who always appeared slightly bewildered by the intensity of my family. "What did they declare?" I inquired. Emerson's reply required a minute to come through, as if she was hesitating to type the words. "Vivian is in trouble. Reverie. Genuine trouble. The boutique is hemorrhaging cash. She was weeping to Thatcher that 3 of her seamstresses quit because paychecks bounced last week. She declared the landlord for the new expansion space is threatening legal action for 2 months of unpaid rent. She kept declaring, 'Mother said she would handle it. Mother said she would find a way.'" I deposited the coffee mug down. The ceramic made a hard clack against the marble. The pieces of the puzzle began to click together with a terrifying precision. Vivienne was failing. The Golden Child's empire was a house of cards, and the wind was picking up. The expansion she had boasted about at Thanksgiving was not a sign of growth. It was a desperate final attempt to generate cash flow to cover old debts. She was drowning, and in the Ashford family, Vivian was not permitted to drown. Vivian was the trophy. If she sank, the family's reputation sank with her. Preston and Cordelia would never permit that. They would do anything to maintain the facade intact. They would sell the furniture. They would mortgage the residence. They would find a way. Mother said she would handle it. My mind raced back to Thanksgiving. The tension, the specific manner Preston had attacked me. He had not merely called me a failure. He had aggressively framed me as one. If you cannot take care of yourself, find yourself on the pavement. Why be so aggressive? Why now? Unless they required establishing a baseline of incompetence for me. Unless they required everyone, the church, the relatives, the community, to believe that Reverie Ashford was a financial train wreck. If Reverie is a known failure, then Reverie possesses no credibility. If Reverie possesses no credibility, then if something goes wrong with finances, well, it must be Reverie's fault. A chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning ran down my spine. I was not merely the black sheep anymore. I was the scapegoat, and they were fattening me up for the slaughter. I walked into my home office. The room was sparse, clinical. I went to the wall behind my desk and pressed my thumb against the biometric scanner of a concealed wall safe. The heavy steel door clicked open with a hiss. Inside were my corporate charters, my deeds, and my personal identification documents. I did not maintain much cash here, just hard drives and paper trails. I extracted a folder labeled Personal Archive. I required seeing something. I flipped through the pages until I located an old lease agreement from 5 years ago, one of the few occasions I had required a physical signature rather than a digital one. I stared at my own name, Reverie J. Ashford. I possessed a distinct signature. The R was sharp, angular, almost like a lightning bolt. The Y looped down with a heavy tail. It was the signature of someone who did not appreciate wasting time. I closed my eyes and attempted to visualize my credit report. I monitored it, of course. I had alerts configured for any new inquiries. But my family knew things about me that the credit bureaus did not. They knew my social security number. They knew my mother's maiden name. They knew the name of my first pet. They possessed the keys to my identity stored in the filing cabinets of my childhood home. Emerson's text flashed in my mind again. Mother said she would find a way. If Vivian required money rapidly, and Preston was tapped out, which I suspected he was given the economy and his pension for living above his means, where would they obtain it? They could not obtain a loan. Vivian's credit was likely devastated if she was bouncing payroll checks. Preston would not risk his own credit rating. He was too proud. But Reverie was invisible. Reverie was vague about her occupation. Reverie was struggling. If a loan appeared in Reverie's name, or if Reverie co-signed a loan and then that loan went bad, well, that just fit the narrative, did it not? Poor Reverie. She attempted to help, but she messed it up again. They were utilizing me as a shield. I could sense it. It was an intuition honed by years of writing code, spotting the bug before it crashed the system. The narrative at church was the patch code, preparing the user base for the glitch. They are destroying my reputation to cover their theft, I whispered to the empty room. I did not experience anger. Anger is a hot, messy emotion, and I had no use for it right now. What I experienced was a cold, crystalline clarity. I experienced the way a surgeon feels when they identify the tumor. It was ugly. It was dangerous. And it had to be excised. I retrieved my phone and texted Emerson back. Do not utter a word to them. Act as though you know nothing. Just maintain your ears open. Then I sat down in my ergonomic chair and unlocked my workstation. I did not log into my work servers. Instead, I opened a new encrypted browser window. I typed in the web address for the state's Uniform Commercial Code database. If there were liens, if there were secured loans taken out against assets that involved me, there might be a trace. I hesitated for a second, my finger hovering over the enter key. Part of me, the small foolish part that still desired a mother and father, hoped I was wrong. I hoped they were merely mean, not criminal. I hoped the homeless rumors were merely petty gossip to make themselves feel better. Because if I pressed this button, and if I discovered what I suspected I was going to discover, there was no returning. This would not be a family squabble. This would be a felony. But then I remembered Vivian's smirk. I remembered Cordelia observing the tablecloth while Preston instructed me to die in the gutter. I pressed enter. The search would require time to be comprehensive. I required pulling full credit reports from all 3 bureaus, which would take 24 hours to update fully with the specific level of detail I required. I required requesting physical copies of recent inquiries. But the decision was made. I was not going to contact them. I was not going to drive over there and scream. How dare you? That is what the old Reverie would have done. That is what the emotional, unstable daughter would do. And that would only assist them. It would provide them more fuel. Observe. She is hysterical. No. I would be silent. I would be a ghost. I closed the safe and spun the dial. I walked back to the window. The city below was waking up. Individuals were going to brunch. Families were walking in the park. My family assumed they were playing a game of social manipulation. They assumed they could sacrifice a pawn to save the queen. They were unaware that the pawn had already crossed the board. The pawn was a queen now, too. And she possessed $25 million, a team of attorneys, and a heart that had finally transformed to stone. I consumed a sip of my cold coffee. It was bitter, exactly the way I preferred it. Proceed, I declared to myself. The storm was not coming. I was the storm, and I was merely waiting for the wind to change direction before I made landfall. Monday morning arrived with the clinical precision of a blade. The sky over Savannah was a sheet of slate gray, pressing down against the glass walls of my office. I had devoted the weekend running background processes on my emotions, compartmentalizing the hurt and bringing the logic to the forefront. I was seated at my desk at 8 hours sharp, my dual monitors glowing with the familiar comfort of code repositories and market analytics. The chaos of Thanksgiving felt distant, like a bad dream I had already analyzed and dismissed. Then at 10:09, my email inbox pinged. It was not a notification from my development team. It was not a client update. It was a message flagged with high-priority red tags, sitting at the top of the list like a festering wound. Sender, Blackwell, and Crane Legal Group. Subject, verification required. Guarantor authorization. Urgent file number 89204. I stared at the screen. The name of the law firm sounded vaguely familiar. The variety of mid-tier aggressive firm that handled debt collection and contract disputes. I hovered my mouse over the subject line. My initial instinct was that it was a phishing scam, some sophisticated attempt to get me to click a malicious link. But the domain name was legitimate. I possessed an automated security protocol that filtered out 99% of spam. This had passed through. I clicked open. The body of the email was brief, formal, and terrifyingly direct. Dear Ms. Ashford, we are attempting to contact you regarding the commercial loan agreement dated October 14, 2022, for which you are listed as the primary guarantor. The principal borrower, Vivian's Atelier Bridal, has missed 3 consecutive payment cycles and is now approaching default status. As the guarantor, your assets are subject to immediate lien initiation if the outstanding balance is not reconciled within 10 business days. Please review the attached execution copy and contact us immediately. The room suddenly experienced a notable chill. The air conditioning hummed, a low drone that sounded like a warning siren. I did not panic. Panic is for individuals who do not possess a plan. Instead, I experienced a heavy, leaden weight settle in my stomach. I downloaded the attachment. It was a 20-page PDF, a scanned document with the heavy, dark grain of something that had been faxed or copied multiple times. I scrolled past the legal language, past the interest rate tables, past the indemnification clauses. I stopped at the summary page. Principal amount, $620,000. Purpose of loan, commercial renovation and expansion of retail premises. Borrower, Vivian Ashford. Guarantor, Reverie Ashford. $620,000. I declared the number aloud to the empty room. $620,000. It was a staggering sum for a bridal boutique in a suburban strip mall. It was enough to purchase a residence. It was enough to ruin a life. I scrolled to the final page, the signature page, and there it was, my name written in blue ink. I inclined closer to the monitor, zooming in until the pixels began to blur. At a glance, to an untrained eye or a fatigued bank clerk, it resembled my signature. It possessed the sharp capital R. It possessed the loop on the Y. But to me, the owner of that hand, it was a grotesque forgery. The rhythm was incorrect. When I sign my name, the K and A connect to the Y in a fluid, unbroken motion. On this document, there was a microscopic hesitation, a tiny break where the pen had lifted, as if the writer had paused to verify a reference. The slant was too vertical. My natural handwriting leans forward, aggressive, and rushing toward the right. This signature stood upright, cautious and deliberate. It was a tracing or a practiced imitation. I observed the date next to the signature, October 14th, 2022. They had done this over a year ago. I sat back in my chair, the leather creaking. This was not a sudden mistake. This was not a desperate, last-minute decision made by a sister in trouble. This was premeditated. While I was constructing my companies, while I was visiting for Christmas and politely consuming their ham, while I was purchasing them birthday gifts, my name was already sitting in a bank vault attached to a ticking time bomb. I retrieved my phone. My hands were steady, but my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I dialed the number listed in the email signature. It rang twice. Blackwell and Crane, Creditor Services. A woman's voice answered. She sounded fatigued. The voice of someone who devotes her day listening to excuses. "This is Reverie Ashford," I declared. My voice was ice. I had just received an email regarding file number 89204. There was the sound of typing on the other end. "One moment, Ms. Ashford." "Yes, I perceive the file here. We have been attempting to reach the borrower, but our calls are going to voicemail. We sent the notice to you as the guarantor because the loan is entering the acceleration phase. I am observing the document right now," I declared. "I desire to be very clear. I did not sign this." The typing stopped. There was a long silence on the line. It was a silence I suspect she had held 1,000 times before. "Ms. Ashford," the woman declared, her tone shifting from bored to patronizing. "The document is notarized. We possess a copy of your driver's license on file. We possess a board resolution from the borrower stating you were present at the signing. I do not care what you possess," I declared, cutting her off. "I was in San Francisco on October 14th, 2022, speaking at a technology conference. I can provide flight records, hotel receipts, and video footage of me on a stage 3,000 miles away from Savannah. That signature is a forgery." The woman exhaled, a heavy, weary sound. "Ma'am, if you are claiming fraud, that is a very serious accusation. You are listed as the guarantor. That means if the borrower does not pay, we come for your assets, your residence, your vehicle, your wages. My wages were not the issue. I could write a check for $620,000 right now and barely dent my portfolio. But that was not the point. The point was the violation. I am not accusing anyone," I declared. "I am stating a fact. I did not authorize this loan. I did not sign this paper." "Listen," the woman declared, her voice dropping slightly, becoming less corporate and more human. "I am merely the case manager, but I will inform you of this. We hear the "I did not sign it" defense 10 times a day. Usually it is a husband signing for a wife or a parent signing for a child. It happens more than you think. But unless you possess a police report and a fraud affidavit, the bank does not care. As far as the law is concerned, you owe us $500,000 plus interest. It happens more than you think." The words echoed the cynicism of the entire system. It was a world where families cannibalized each other for capital. "I will be in touch with your legal department," I declared. "Do not contact me again without an attorney present." I hung up before she could respond. I turned back to the PDF. I required seeing the rest. I scrolled down to the exhibits attached at the end of the file. There was a photocopy of my Georgia driver's license. It was an old one, Expired last year, but valid at the time of the signing. I stared at the photograph. I remembered that license. I had lost it 2 years ago during a visit to my parents' residence. I had assumed it fell out of my purse in the driveway. I had searched the vehicle, searched the grass, and eventually just went to the DMV to obtain a replacement. I had not lost it. Someone had taken it. And then there was the notary stamp. State of Georgia, Notary Public, Dorothy Whitmore. I recognized that name. Dorothy Whitmore was a woman from my mother's church group. She was the sweet grandmotherly woman who always brought potato salad to the potlucks. She was my mother's prayer warrior partner. The picture was now complete, and it was uglier than I could have imagined. This was not merely Vivian acting alone. You do not obtain a notarized loan with a counterfeit signature and a stolen ID without a network. Vivian required the money. Preston likely orchestrated the structure because he comprehended the legal language. Cordelia provided the access, the stolen ID, the friendly notary who would stamp a document without requesting to see the signer, because Cordelia declared it was acceptable. They had all conspired. It was a family project. The project was utilize Reveries credit to fund Vivian's dream. And suddenly the Thanksgiving dinner made perfect horrific sense. Preston knew the loan was going bad. The email declared Vivian had missed 3 payments. That meant the trouble commenced 3 months ago. They knew the bank was coming. They knew that eventually Blackwell and Crane would track me down. The insults, the find yourself on the pavement comment. It was not merely cruelty. It was a preemptive strike. They were planting the seeds of my insolvency. They desired the narrative to be that Reverie was broke, Reverie was unstable, Reverie was homeless. That way, when the bank came after me and I claimed I did not sign the loan, the family could turn around and declare, "She is lying. She signed it to assist her sister. But now that she is broke and living on the pavement, she is attempting to weasel out of it." They were discrediting the witness before the trial even commenced. They were not merely willing to steal from me. They were willing to destroy my credibility, my reputation, and my sanity to cover their tracks. They were prepared to watch me lose everything, my condominium, my business, my name, merely to maintain Vivian's failing boutique open for another 6 months. I observed the forged signature again. It appeared so fragile on the white page. A few curves of ink. My hands were no longer shaking. A cold calm had taken over. The variety of absolute zero focus I utilized when I was rewriting a kernel code that controlled 1,000 shipping containers. They desired a guarantor. They possessed one, but they had misunderstood the definition of the word. A guarantor is someone who ensures the contract is fulfilled. I opened a new tab on my browser. I did not search for bankruptcy attorneys. I searched for criminal defense attorneys and forensic handwriting experts. I retrieved the printed page of the loan agreement. I ran my finger over the counterfeit signature. "You desire to use my name?" I whispered. "Fine. I will ensure everyone knows exactly what this name is worth." I reached for my phone again. I did not contact my parents. I did not contact Vivian. That time had passed. I navigated to my contacts and located the number for Sterling Mercer, the most ruthless corporate litigator in the city. He cost $900 an hour, and he was worth every cent. It was time to introduce my family to the only language they seemed to respect: consequences. The offices of Mercer and Partners were located on the 42nd floor of the Bank of America Corporate Center, 8 floors above my own condominium, and a world away from the suburban mediocrity of my parents' residence. I walked into the conference room at 2:00 in the afternoon. The room carried the scent of polished mahogany and the expensive, crisp scent of billable hours. Sterling Mercer was waiting for me. He was a man who appeared as though he had been carved out of granite and dressed in Italian wool. We had worked together during the sale of Harbor Point Technologies, and he was one of the few individuals on Earth who knew the exact dimensions of my net worth. He was a shark in the murky waters of mergers and acquisitions, but his specialty was asset protection. I sat down and slid the folder across the table. I did not declare hello. I simply declared, "Inform me how bad it is." Sterling opened the file. He adjusted his glasses and devoted 5 minutes reading the loan documents I had printed that morning. His face remained impassive, a mask of professional neutrality until he reached the signature page. He paused. He tilted the page toward the light. Then he observed me. "This is sloppy work," he declared, his voice a low rumble. "But it is dangerous work." He pressed a button on the intercom. "Send in Mr. Caldwell and obtain the forensic scanner." 10 minutes later, we were joined by a handwriting analyst Sterling maintained on retainer. We devoted the next hour dissecting my own name. The analyst, a quiet man with thick spectacles, positioned the forged document under a high-resolution digital microscope that projected the image onto a wall-mounted screen. "Observe here," the analyst declared, utilizing a laser pointer to circle the top of the capital R. He retrieved a reference image of my actual signature from my incorporation papers. "In your genuine signature, the pressure is heaviest at the downstroke. You attack the paper. In the questioned document, the pressure is even throughout. That indicates the writer was drawing the shape, not signing a name. They were moving slowly, careful to remain within the lines of a memory or a tracing." He moved the pointer to the loop of the Y. "And here, perceive the microscopic ink bloat." The pen paused here for a fraction of a second. The forger hesitated. Natural signatures flow. Forgeries stutter. This is a simulation. Sterling reclined in his chair, tapping a gold pen against his chin. "So, it is not a mistake. It is not a clerical error where the bank mixed up files. This is intentional identity theft." "It is worse than that," I declared. I extracted the timeline I had sketched on a notepad. "Observe the dates," Sterling observed. "October 14th, 2022. They required money for the renovation," I explained. "My father structured the deal, but his credit is leveraged to the hilt. Vivian possessed no assets, so they required a guarantor with a clean sheet. They utilized my name because I was the ghost. I was the one who was never around, the one who supposedly did not pay attention to details." Sterling nodded slowly. "It is a classic predation strategy. They targeted you because they assumed you were weak enough to be exploited and creditworthy enough to carry the load. But there is something else in the file that you require seeing." He slid a tablet across the table. "My team retrieved the preliminary communication logs associated with the loan application. We possess a contact at the bank who owed us a favor. This is an email chain between the loan officer and the applicant, Vivian Ashford." I observed the screen. The email was dated a week before the signing. From Vivian Ashford to J. Miller, loan officer. Subject, regarding presence. Mr. Miller, regarding the signing on the 14th. My sister Reverie possesses a severe anxiety disorder regarding legal proceedings. She has agreed to back the loan, but she requested if we could handle the paperwork quietly. She is very private and despises scenes. My mother will bring the notarized documents directly. Reverie will not be coming in. We merely desire to get this done without upsetting her. I experience the blood drain from my face. She possesses a severe anxiety disorder. That was the narrative. That was the lock that maintained the door shut. They had utilized my introversion, my distance from the family, and weaponized it. They had painted a picture of a fragile, mentally unstable sister who was too anxious to come to the bank, justifying why I was not there to sign in person. And the bank, eager to close the deal and collect their fees, had looked the other way. "They banked on your silence," Sterling declared, reading my expression. "They calculated that even if you discovered, you would not sue. They assumed you would be too afraid of upsetting the family or causing a scene to take legal action. They utilized your own desire for privacy as a leash to choke you with," I observed Sterling. The cold clarity from the morning returned, harder this time. "They miscalculated," I declared. Sterling stood up and walked to the whiteboard. He uncapped a black marker. "We possess two options, Reverie, and I require you to choose your weapon." He drew a vertical line down the center of the board. "Option 1, the nuclear option. We file a police report for criminal fraud and identity theft. We sue the bank for negligence. We sue your sister and parents for damages. The loan is declared void ab initio, invalid from the start. You walk away clean. And then?" I inquired. Sterling shrugged. "Vivian goes to prison, minimum 2 years for bank fraud." Your father loses his law license for facilitating it. Your mother likely faces conspiracy charges. The notary loses her commission and faces jail time. The family is destroyed publicly and permanently. I stared at the board. It was the justice they deserved, but it was messy. It involved years of court dates, tabloid headlines, and me being dragged through the mud as the daughter who put her family in jail. It was a victory, but it was a Pyrrhic one. Option 2? I inquired. Option 2 is the financial option, Sterling declared. He drew a dollar sign on the other side of the board. The loan is currently in default. The bank is nervous. They recognize the documentation is shaky. I can smell the fear in their emails. They desire this off their books before the regulators perceive it. We approach the bank not as a victim, but as an investor. I frowned. Explain. We purchase the note, Sterling declared. We establish a shell company, Ironwood Capital LLC, or something similar. We approach the bank and offer to purchase the debt at a discount. The bank will be content to sell a non-performing loan for 80 cents on the dollar, merely to clear the liability. And once I own the note? I inquired. Sterling smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Once you own the note, you are the bank. You step into the shoes of the creditor. You own the debt. You own the collateral. You control the timeline. You can foreclose on Vivian's boutique. You can seize the assets. You can enforce the personal guarantees. And you can do it all without ever stepping inside a courtroom. I observed the two options. The nuclear option was a hammer. The financial option was a scalpel. But then a thought occurred to me. Why choose? Sterling, I declared. Can we do both? He raised an eyebrow. Both. I desire to purchase the note, I declared. I desire to own the debt. I desire to hold the leash, but I also desire the evidence of fraud documented. I desire the leverage of prison time hanging over their heads, but I desire the control of being their creditor. Sterling contemplated for a moment, then nodded slowly. It is aggressive. We can commission a private forensic audit to prove the fraud. We maintain that in our back pocket. Meanwhile, we purchase the note. If they fight the foreclosure, we drop the fraud evidence on the table. It is a checkmate in 2 moves. Do it, I declared. Sterling began writing on the whiteboard again, mapping out the timeline. He wrote Thanksgiving in red ink. Then he wrote homeless rumors. Then he wrote loan default. Observe this, he declared, stepping back. This is the timeline of their desperation. I walked up to the board. The dates told a story that was even more cynical than I had realized. October 1st, Vivian misses her second payment. October 15th, the bank sends a warning letter. November 1st, Vivian misses the third payment. The loan goes into default status. The bank threatens to contact the guarantor. November 23rd, Thanksgiving, Preston instructs me to find myself on the pavement. November 26th, Cordelia informs the church I am homeless. They knew, I whispered. On Thanksgiving, they knew the bank was about to contact me. They knew the jig was up. Exactly, Sterling declared. The find yourself on the pavement comment was not merely an insult. It was psychological preparation. They were attempting to break your confidence so that when the bank contacted, you would experience helplessness. They were attempting to position you as a failure socially so that nobody would believe you were a victim financially. They desired you to be too ashamed to fight back. I traced the line on the whiteboard with my finger. They assumed they were playing chess. They assumed I was merely a piece on the board to be sacrificed. They were unaware I possessed $25 million in the bank and the best attorney in the state standing in the room. Establish the LLC, I instructed Sterling. I desire the name to be obscure. Ironwood Capital is fine. Make the offer to the bank tomorrow. Inform them you represent a private equity firm interested in distressed retail assets. Do not permit them to know it is me. And the fraud investigation? Sterling inquired. Full steam ahead, I declared. I desire the affidavit. I desire the expert testimony regarding the signature. I desire the notary logs. I desire it all packaged in a nice, neat legal binder. Sterling closed the folder. It will cost you. The retainer alone will be $50,000. I extracted my checkbook from my purse. It was the only occasion I would utilize a pen that day. I wrote the check for $100,000. Expedite it, I declared. I desire to own that debt before they possess time to realize the ground is shifting. Sterling accepted the check. You recognize reverie. Typically, when individuals do this, it is about revenge. They desire to observe the other individual bleed. I stood up and smoothed my skirt. I walked to the window and observed the city. Somewhere out there, Vivienne was probably panic purchasing fabric she could not afford. And Preston was probably pouring a scotch, informing himself he did what he had to do to save the family honor. I am not searching for revenge, Sterling, I declared, turning back to him. Revenge is emotional. Revenge is messy. This is not about making them bleed. Then what is it? He inquired. I retrieved my purse and walked to the door. I am simply weary of being the fire extinguisher, I declared. For 30 years they have ignited fires and expected me to extinguish them. They utilized my silence, my name, and my credit to maintain themselves warm. Now I am merely removing the safety equipment. If they burn, it is because they struck the match. I walked out of the office and into the elevator. As the doors closed, I observed the numbers countdown. 42, 41, 40. I was descending back to street level, but I experienced as though I was ascending. For the first time in my life, I was not the daughter or the sister or the failure. I was the majority shareholder in their destruction, and business was about to be very, very good. The collapse of Vivienne's empire happened faster than even my most aggressive algorithms could have predicted. I had expected a slow burn, a gradual erosion of capital over 6 months. I was incorrect. It was not a leak. It was a landslide. 2 days after I retained Sterling Mercer, I sat in his office again. The view of the city was the same, but the atmosphere inside the room had shifted. The air was charged with the static electricity of imminent action. Sterling did not offer me coffee this time. He offered me a file that was thick with the autopsy of my sister's business. The patient is coding, Sterling declared, tossing the folder onto the mahogany table. It hit the wood with a heavy thud. Blackwell and Crane are panicked. They are not merely observing missed payments anymore. They are observing total insolvency. I opened the file. The numbers were catastrophic. Vivienne had not merely missed rent. She was 3 months behind on the lease for her primary location, and the landlord had already drafted eviction papers. Her primary fabric supplier in Italy had positioned a hold on all shipments due to unpaid invoices totaling $40,000. And worst of all, there was a string of chargebacks from angry brides who had received dresses that were ill-fitting or unfinished. It is a death spiral, Sterling explained, pacing the length of the room. When the cash flow stops, the inventory stops. When the inventory stops, the sales stop. And when the sales stop, the debt becomes a heavy stone around the neck. The bank recognizes this. They recognize that if they wait for a court judgment, there will be nothing left to seize but some used sewing machines and a pile of cheap lace. So, they desire out, I declared. It was not a question. They are desperate to offload the risk, Sterling confirmed. They perceive the writing on the wall. They recognize the guarantor is contesting the signature. They do not desire a fraud lawsuit. They merely desire their capital back, or at least a portion of it. They are searching for a buyer for the note. This was the moment. The window was open. I observed Sterling. Do they recognize it as me? No, Sterling declared. I approached them through a broker. I informed them I represent a private investment group searching for distressed retail assets. They possess no awareness Reverie Ashford is involved. To them, it is merely an anonymous LLC swooping in to pick over the carcass. Good, I declared. Maintain it that way. We devoted the next hour constructing the cage. I had instructed my accountants to form a new legal entity earlier that morning. It was called Ironwood Capital LLC. The name meant nothing. It was bland, corporate, and sounded vaguely like an insurance company or a property management firm. It was the perfect mask. I signed the operating agreement as the sole member, but Sterling would act as the authorized signatory for all public interactions. Ironwood Capital would be the face of the executioner. I would be the mind behind it. Then came the second shock. Sterling retrieved the UCC filings, the Uniform Commercial Code documents that detailed exactly what had been pledged as collateral for the loan. I had assumed naively that the loan was secured only by the inventory, the dresses, the veils, the shoes. I was incorrect. "Observe the schedule of assets," Sterling declared, tapping the screen. "Your father really did a number here. He did not merely pledge the inventory. He pledged the leasehold interest and the hard assets." I inclined in. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was clear. The loan was secured by everything: the expensive industrial sewing machines, the custom lighting fixtures, the point-of-sale computer systems, even the lease itself. The right to occupy the space was tied to the loan. And there was more. They pledged the intellectual property, Sterling declared quietly. The brand name, Vivian's Atelier Bridal, the customer lists, the website domain. If you purchase this note, Reverie, and if you foreclose, you do not merely obtain the furniture. You own the company. You can lock them out of their own building. You can take the website offline. You can literally turn off the lights. I sat back, absorbing the magnitude of the leverage. Preston had been so arrogant, so certain that Vivian would succeed, that he had bet the entire farm. He had signed away the very existence of the business, assuming that the day of reckoning would never come, or perhaps assuming that if it did come, he could bully me into covering the loss. He had handed me the keys to the kingdom, and he did not even recognize it. "Purchase the note," I declared. My voice was steady, void of any tremor. "Offer them $500,000. That is a discount on the principal, but it saves them the legal fees of fighting me on the fraud. They will accept it." Sterling nodded. "They will accept it in a heartbeat." He made the call right there in the room. I listened as he spoke to the bank's asset manager. He was smooth, professional, painting a picture of Ironwood Capital as a benevolent investor searching to restructure the debt. He did not mention that the restructuring would involve an axe. When he hung up, he smiled. It was a shark smile. Done. They are drafting the assignment of debt now. By tomorrow afternoon, Ironwood Capital will be the primary creditor for Vivian's Atelier Bridal. You will own the debt. The financial trap was established. Now, I required confirming the moral rot. Sterling reached into his briefcase and extracted a smaller sealed envelope. "This is the report from the handwriting expert, combined with the private investigator's findings on the notary." I accepted the envelope. It felt light, but I recognized the contents were heavy enough to crush a reputation. I slit the seal and slid out the papers. The forensic analysis of the signature was conclusive. Highly probable simulation. The report read, "Inconsistencies in pen pressure and stroke order indicate a deliberate attempt to copy the exemplar." But it was the second page that made my blood transform to ice. The notary, Dorothy Whitmore, had been interviewed by the investigator under the guise of a routine compliance check. She had cracked almost immediately. Subject admitted to notarizing the document without the signatory present, the report stated. Subject stated she did so as a personal favor to Cordelia Ashford. Subject claimed Mrs. Ashford assured her that her daughter Reverie was too busy to come in and had given verbal permission. I stared at the name. Dorothy Whitmore. I remembered her. She was a fixture in my childhood. She sat 2 pews behind us at church every Sunday. She had knitted me a scarf when I went away to college. She was one of the good women of the congregation, always discussing righteousness and truth. And yet, for a personal favor, she had violated the law and assisted my mother frame me for a $600,000 debt. It was a conspiracy of the righteous. They had justified it to themselves, I was certain. They probably informed themselves they were assisting the family. "It is for a good cause," Cordelia would have declared. "Reverie will not mind. She is family." The betrayal was not merely financial, it was communal. My mother had utilized her social network, her church connections to facilitate the fraud. She had transformed her prayer group into a crime ring. "This ends now," I declared, sliding the report back into the envelope. Sterling observed me. "Now that you own the note, You possess the power to trigger the default clause immediately. We can send the demand letter tomorrow. 7 days to pay in full, or we seize the assets." "No," I declared. "Not yet." Sterling appeared surprised. "Why wait?" "Every day you wait is money lost. Because I require them to experience security one last time," I declared. "I desire them to assume the bank has gone quiet. I desire them to assume they dodged the bullet. And I require verifying one last thing." I stood up and walked to the window. The city lights were beginning to flicker on as the evening approached. "I require conversing with Thatcher," I declared. Thatcher Brennan, Vivian's fiancé. He was the anomaly in the Ashford orbit. Thatcher was a landscape architect, a man who worked with his hands and comprehended the patience of growing things. He was kind, soft-spoken, and utterly ill-equipped for the viper pit he was marrying into. He had always been decent to me at family gatherings. While Preston ignored me, and Vivian mocked me, Thatcher would inquire about my work. He would listen. He treated me like a human being, not a prop. I suspected he was innocent in this. I suspected he did not recognize about the forgery. But I required being certain. If I was going to drop a bomb on the family, I desired to ensure the one decent individual possessed a chance to find shelter. I departed Sterling's office and drove to a small coffee shop on the edge of the arts district. It was neutral ground, far away from the country club and the high-rise banks. I had texted Thatcher earlier, requesting a quick meetup. I informed him it was regarding a wedding gift. He was sitting at a corner table when I arrived, appearing haggard. He was a handsome man, typically with a bright, easy smile, but today he appeared as though he had not slept in a week. He was staring into a black coffee, his shoulders slumped. When he perceived me, he stood up, forcing a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Reverie, it is good to perceive you. I was surprised you reached out." I sat down across from him. I did not order anything. I merely observed him, studying his face for any sign of deception. I perceived only exhaustion. "How are you holding up, Thatcher?" I inquired. He released a short, dry laugh. "Honestly, it has been a rough month. The wedding planning is intense and the business." He trailed off, observing away. He did not desire to gossip. He was loyal. "I heard things are tight at the boutique," I declared gently. Thatcher ran a hand through his hair. "Tight is an understatement. Vivian is stressed out of her mind. Preston is stressed. It feels like everyone is walking on eggshells." He inclined in, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Reverie, can I inquire you something? And please do not get mad." "Go ahead," I declared. "Is it true about you? Cordelia has been informing everyone that you are, well, that you are in a bad spot financially, that you might lose your apartment." I observed him. This was the test. "Do I appear like I am losing my apartment?" I inquired. I was wearing a cashmere coat that cost $3,000 and a watch that was worth more than his truck. Thatcher observed me, really observed me, and I perceived the realization dawn in his eyes. "No," he declared slowly. "You do not. You appear powerful." I inclined forward. "Thatcher, listen to me very carefully. I am not homeless. I am not broke. In fact, I am doing better than anyone in this family could possibly imagine." Thatcher frowned, confusion knitting his brow. Then why would Cordelia declare that? Why would Preston permit individuals to believe it? "Because they require a scapegoat," I declared, "and because they require a cover story." "Cover story for what?" he inquired. I hesitated. I could not inform him everything. Not yet. I could not inform him that I was Ironwood Capital. I could not inform him that I held the mortgage on his fiancée's dreams. "There are things happening, Thatcher," I declared. "Things involving money and papers that I never signed." Thatcher's face went pale. "The papers?" I froze. "What papers, Thatcher?" He observed his hands. "A few months ago, Vivian was panicked. She declared the bank required a cosigner. She declared Preston could not do it. She informed me she fixed it. I did not inquire how." I should have inquired how. He observed up at me, his eyes wide with horror. "Did they utilize you?" He recognized. He did not recognize the details, but his gut had informed him something was incorrect, and he had buried it because he loved her. I reached across the table and positioned my hand on his. It was a gesture of mercy, perhaps the last one I would offer this family. "Thatcher," I declared, "I am going to provide you a piece of advice. Do not sign anything. Do not place your name on any lease, any loan, or any guarantee for that boutique. If you possess any assets, your truck, your savings, maintain them separate." "Why?" he whispered. "What is going to happen?" I stood up. I could not save Vivian. I could not save Preston or Cordelia. They had made their choices, but Thatcher was merely a casualty of war. "The storm is coming, Thatcher," I declared, "and it is going to wash everything away. Just ensure you are not standing in the flood zone." I rotated and walked out of the coffee shop. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a message from Sterling. "The wire transfer has cleared. Ironwood Capital LLC is officially the owner of the note. The bank has transferred all files. We possess control." I stopped on the sidewalk. The evening atmosphere was cold, biting against my skin. I consumed a deep breath. It tasted of exhaust and winter. I owned them. I owned the dresses. I owned the machines. I owned the lease. I owned the lie. I unlocked my vehicle and got in. I checked the calendar on my phone. Tomorrow was Tuesday. I would permit them to sweat for 2 more days. I would permit them to assume she had gotten away with it. I would permit Preston to sleep soundly, assuming his clever little scheme had worked. And then on Thursday, exactly 3 weeks after they instructed me to find myself on the pavement, I would introduce them to their new landlord. I started the engine. The drive home was smooth. For the first time in weeks, the road ahead was perfectly clear. Wednesday night settled over Savannah like a heavy wool blanket. It was 11:45 in the evening, and the city lights below my condominium were blurring into streaks of rain on the glass. I was not sleeping. I was sitting in the darkness of my living room, the blue light of my tablet illuminating my face, reviewing the final draft of the asset purchase agreement one last time. My phone, resting on the arm of the sofa, lit up. The vibration against the leather sounded like an insect buzzing in a jar. It was Thatcher Brennan. I hesitated before answering. I had provided Thatcher a warning yesterday, a lifeline to extract himself from the blast radius. If he was contacting me now, late at night, it meant the water was already rising inside the Ashford family residence. I slid my thumb across the screen. "Hello, Thatcher," I declared softly. "Reverie." His voice was a harsh whisper. I could hear the echo of a small space, perhaps a bathroom or a garage. He was hiding. "They are losing their minds over here." I deposited the tablet down. "Inform me." "Blackwell and Crane stopped contacting," Thatcher declared. "The collection calls stopped yesterday. Preston assumes it means his letter worked. He sent them a letter threatening a countersuit for harassment. He is strutting around the kitchen informing Cordelia that he stared the bank down. But Vivian is terrified. She assumes it is the calm before the storm. Vivian was smarter than Preston, I noted. That was a low bar, but at least she possessed instincts. "And what are they declaring about me?" I inquired. There was a pause. I heard Thatcher consume a shaky breath. "Reverie. You require knowing what they are preparing." I heard Preston on the phone with his old law partner. "He is constructing a defense in case you discover about the loan." "Go on," I declared. "He is going to declare you agreed to it," Thatcher declared. "He is going to declare you verbally authorized the signature to assist your sister. But then, you got jealous of Vivian's expansion plans and decided to renege. He is going to paint you as the bitter, vindictive sister who is attempting to sabotage Vivian out of spite. He is going to declare the homeless rumors were actually started by you to garner sympathy." I experienced a cold smile touch my lips. It was fascinating, really. Preston was not merely a liar. He was an architect of lies. He was constructing a reality where he was the victim of an ungrateful daughter rather than the perpetrator of a felony. "He is gaslighting the entire situation," I declared. "Yes," Thatcher declared. "And Cordelia is backing him up. She informed Vivian that if you ever inquire about the signature, she should merely declare Reverie knows about it. She just forgot. They are counting on your memory being questioned. They are counting on you being too weak to fight a united front. I reclined into the sofa cushions. They were preparing for a skirmish. They were unaware they were standing in the middle of a nuclear testing site. Did you inquire about the mechanics, Thatcher? I inquired. Did you inquire who actually held the pen? I did, he whispered. I inquired Vivian tonight. She was weeping. She declared she was too scared to do it herself. She declared her hand was shaking too much. So, who signed my name? Mother, Thatcher declared. The words suspended in the atmosphere, heavy and toxic. Mother, Cordelia Ashford, the woman who quoted scripture at the dinner table, the woman who adjusted napkins and worried about appearances. She had not merely facilitated the crime. She had committed it. She had sat down, practiced my name, and executed the forgery with her own hand. It makes sense, I declared, my voice devoid of emotion. She recognizes my handwriting better than anyone. She utilized to sign my report cards when I was a child. Reverie, there is something else, Thatcher declared. His voice dropped even lower. I debated whether to send this to you. I do not desire to destroy the family. I merely do not desire them to destroy you. You are not destroying anything, Thatcher, I declared. You are merely turning on the lights. Send it. I possess an audio file, he declared. My phone was recording a voice memo for a site visit yesterday, and I left it on the kitchen counter by accident. It picked up a conversation between Cordelia and Preston while I was in the other room. Send it, I repeated. A moment later, a file appeared in my message inbox. It was a simple audio waveform, jagged little peaks and valleys representing the betrayal of my bloodline. I tapped. The audio was scratchy at first, the sound of silverware clinking on plates. Then Preston's voice, booming and confident. She will not sue, Cordelia. She does not possess the stomach for court. She folds every time I raise my voice. Then my mother's voice. It was not the soft, wavering voice she utilized in public. It was sharp, practical, and cold. I am not worried about her suing Preston. I am worried about the bank. But we merely require getting through the next 60 days. Once the expansion opens, Vivian can make the payments. And regarding Reverie, even if she discovers later, what can she do? It will be done. She is not going to send her own mother to jail. We merely have to hold the line. After 2 months, it is too late for her to complain. We merely inform her we did it for her own good, to assist her build credit. For her own good. I stopped the recording. The silence in my condominium was absolute. There it was. The smoking gun. It was not merely desperation. It was calculation. They were banking on my love for them, or rather my guilt, to protect them from the consequences of their theft. They believed that I was so desperate for their approval that I would consume a $600,000 debt merely to maintain the peace. They assumed I was a doormat. I retrieved the phone again. Thank you, Thatcher. What are you going to do? He inquired. I am going to finish this, I declared. But I require you to do one last thing for me. Anything, he declared. Tomorrow morning, Ironwood Capital is going to contact Preston. We are going to demand an immediate meeting to discuss the default. We are going to offer a settlement negotiation instead of an immediate foreclosure. Okay, Thatcher declared. They will assume Ironwood is merely some corporate entity, I explained. They will assume they can charm their way out of it, or lie their way into an extension. I require you to ensure they all come. Preston, Cordelia, Vivian. Inform them it is their only chance to save the boutique. Where? Thatcher inquired. Magnolia and Stone, I declared. The private dining room in the back. 7 on Thursday evening. Magnolia and Stone, Thatcher repeated. That is expensive. It is appropriate, I declared. It is where individuals go to celebrate. And tomorrow we are going to celebrate the truth. I hung up the phone. I did not sleep that night. I devoted the hours until dawn sitting by the window, observing the rain stop and the city wake up. I experienced a strange sense of detachment, as if I were observing a movie of my own life. The hurt, The deep, childish part of me that merely desired my mother to love me had finally been cauterized by the sound of her voice on that recording. She is not going to send her own mother to jail. She was correct in a manner. I was not going to send her to jail. I was going to permit her walk into the cell herself and lock the door. Thursday morning, I met Sterling Mercer at his office. He appeared fresh, rested, and prepared for blood. "The transfer is complete," he declared as soon as I walked in. "Ironwood Capital LLC is now the legal holder of the promissory note and all security agreements. We possess the power of God over that bridal boutique." I sat down. I played him the recording Thatcher had sent. Sterling listened, his face hardening. When it concluded, he released a low whistle. "That is admissibility gold," he declared. "It proves intent. It proves conspiracy. It destroys any defense of accidental signing or implied authority. If we play this in front of a judge, your mother receives 5 years minimum." I nodded. "Position it on a flash drive," I declared, "and print the transcript. I desire it in the file." Sterling opened his briefcase and extracted 2 thick binders. He positioned them side by side on the table. They appeared identical from the outside, black leather, heavy, authoritative. "This is the setup," Sterling declared, tapping the left binder. "Binder A, the civil file. This contains the purchase of the debt, the default notice, and the foreclosure documents. This is the business end. This declares, 'Pay me, or I take everything.'" He tapped the right binder. "Binder B, the criminal file. This contains the forensic handwriting analysis, the investigator's report on the notary, the affidavit from the bank confirming the fraud, and now the transcript of that recording. This is the nuclear end. This declares, 'You are felons.'" I observed the 2 binders. They represented the 2 paths my family could take. "We walk in with both," I declared. Sterling nodded. "We present binder A first. We permit them to assume this is merely about money. We permit them to attempt to negotiate. We permit Preston to attempt to bully Ironwood Capital, and when they refuse to pay or when they attempt to lie, then we open binder B," I concluded. "Exactly," Sterling declared. He checked his watch. "I have booked the room at Magnolia and Stone. I informed the staff we are a private equity firm conducting a sensitive acquisition. We will possess total privacy." "Good," I declared. "Reverie," Sterling declared, his voice softening slightly. "You require being prepared for their reaction. When they walk in and perceive you, they are not going to be ashamed. Not at first. They are going to be angry. They are going to experience tricked. I recognize," I declared. "They are narcissists. They will perceive my success as a personal attack on them." Sterling stood up and buttoned his jacket. "Merely remember, you are not their daughter tonight. You are the chairman of the board of Ironwood Capital. You are the entity that owns their debt. Maintain that distance. If you permit them to drag you back into the family dynamic, you lose." I stood up to meet him. I was wearing a suit I had purchased in Milan a year ago. Sharp charcoal wool that fit like armor. I had drawn my hair back into a severe, tight bun. I wore no jewelry except for my watch. "I am not their daughter," I repeated. "I am the consequences of their actions." The day passed in a blur of low-level anxiety, but by the time Sixton arrived, I was calm. I drove to the restaurant alone. Magnolia and Stone was located in a restored textile mill, all exposed brick and dim Edison bulbs. It was the variety of place my family loved, because it projected an image of rustic wealth. I entered through the back entrance, guided by the host who recognized me by my corporate name. "Right this way, Miss Ashford," he declared. "Mr. Mercer is already inside." The private room was enclosed in glass but soundproof. A long table made of reclaimed wood sat in the center. Sterling was already there, arranging the 2 black binders at the head of the table. He observed up and nodded. "They are 5 minutes out," he declared, glancing at his phone. "Thatcher just texted. He is driving them," he declared. "Preston is rehearsing a speech about fiduciary responsibility and good faith efforts." I assumed my seat at the head of the table, facing the door. I positioned my hands flat on the wood. The surface was cool, I inquired you to bring the portable projector, I declared. Sterling pointed to a sleek device sitting on a side table. Connected and ready. The signature analysis is queued up. Perfect. I heard voices in the corridor. The heavy oak door muffled them, but I could distinguish the tones. Preston's blustering baritone. Cordelia's nervous, fluttery soprano. Vivian's sharp, complaining whine. Why do we have to meet at dinner? Vivian was declaring. I do not possess an appetite. It is a power move, sweetie. Preston replied, his voice muffled. They desire to intimidate us. But do not worry. I have handled sharks like this before. We merely require buying time. I observed the door handle rotate. It was a slow, heavy rotation. Sterling stood up, smoothing his tie. I remained seated. The door swung open. Cordelia entered first, wearing her Sunday best, a blue dress that she assumed made her appear demure. Preston followed, wearing his courtroom suit, a navy pinstripe that was 10 years out of fashion. Vivienne brought up the rear, appearing pale and clutching a designer handbag that I recognized was likely placed on a credit card she could not pay. Thatcher lingered in the doorway, his eyes meeting mine for a split second before he observed the floor. They walked in with their chins up, prepared to face a stranger, prepared to lie to a suit from a bank. They perceived Sterling first. Preston stepped forward, extending his hand, a practiced, oily smile on his face. Good evening, he boomed. I am Preston Ashford, legal counsel for Vivian's atelier. I assume you are the representative from Ironwood. Then he observed past Sterling. He perceived the individual sitting at the head of the table. He perceived the charcoal suit. He perceived the face that he had observed with disdain across the Thanksgiving table 3 weeks ago. Preston stopped mid-step. His hand dropped. His mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Cordelia gasped, a sharp intake of air that sounded like a tire puncturing. She grasped Preston's arm. Vivian froze, her eyes widening until they were white circles in her pale face. Reverie, Preston whispered. The booming confidence evaporated, replaced by a confusion so profound it was almost comical. What are you doing here? I did not smile. I did not stand up. I simply observed them, one by one. I permitted the silence to stretch until it was tight enough to snap a neck. Please sit down, I declared. My voice was calm, professional, and terrifyingly polite. Reverie, this is a private meeting, Preston stammered, his face flushing red. We are meeting with the investors who purchased Vivian's loan. You cannot be here. This is serious business, not some game. I motioned to the chairs opposite me. I recognize exactly who you are meeting, Preston, I declared. Vivian stepped forward, her voice trembling. Reverie, get out. Seriously, we are in trouble, and we do not possess time for your drama. The individuals from Ironwood Capital are going to be here any second. Sterling Mercer stepped forward. He cleared his throat. Mr. Ashford, Mrs. Ashford, Ms. Ashford, he declared formally. There seems to be a misunderstanding. He gestured toward me with an open hand. May I introduce you to the sole managing member and primary shareholder of Ironwood Capital LLC? He declared. The room went dead silent. Sterling continued, his voice hammering the nails into the coffin. The entity that purchased your promissory note yesterday. The entity that currently holds the lien on your business, your inventory, your lease, and your personal assets. He observed Preston. You are not meeting with a stranger, Mr. Ashford. You are meeting with Reverie. I observed the realization hit them like a physical blow. Preston's face went from red to gray. Cordelia placed a hand to her mouth. Vivian grasped the back of a chair to steady herself. You purchased the debt, Vivian whispered. I inclined forward, clasping my hands together. I did not merely purchase the debt, Vivian, I declared. I purchased the truth. I tapped the black binder in front of me. Now sit down. We possess a lot of paperwork to review, and I suggest you do not lie to me because unlike the bank, I recognize exactly whose handwriting is on the bottom of that contract. Preston sank into a chair, his legs seemingly giving out. He observed me, and for the first time in my life, I did not perceive a father observing a disappointment. I perceived a man observing his judge. The trap was sprung. The steel jaws had slammed shut, and there was nowhere left to run. The silence in the private dining room of Magnolia and Stone was not empty. It was heavy, suffocating, and pressurized. It felt less like a restaurant and more like a submarine descending past its crush depth. Sterling Mercer had just dropped the guillotine blade. "You are meeting with Reverie," and the echo of those words seemed to vibrate against the exposed brick walls. I observed them. I observed the individuals who had raised me, the individuals who had shared my blood and my dinner table, as they attempted to process the impossibility of the moment. They were standing at the edge of the abyss, and their reactions were a masterclass in human psychology. Cordelia was the first to move. Her training as the consummate hostess kicked in, a reflexive defense mechanism against awkwardness. She blinked rapidly, her hands fluttering up to touch the pearl necklace at her throat, and then she forced a smile. It was a terrible, brittle thing, like a crack in a porcelain plate. She withdrew the chair to my right, the position of the guest of honor, and sat down with a stiff, unnatural grace. "Well," she declared, her voice pitching slightly higher than usual, "this is unexpected, but I suppose the Lord works in mysterious ways." She observed me, her eyes pleading for a return to the script, where we pretended everything was fine. "Thank you for arranging this, Reverie," she continued, smoothing her napkin on her lap. It was quite a shock, hearing that name, Ironwood Capital. But recognizing it as you, well, it is a relief, really. We were so worried we would be dealing with some heartless banker. I hope we can count on your cooperation to clear this mess up quickly. She was attempting to reframe the narrative in real time. In her mind, I was no longer the adversary. I was the safety net. She had decided in the span of 10 seconds that I had purchased the debt to save them. Preston did not sit immediately. He stood behind his chair, his knuckles white as he gripped the wood. His face was a map of conflict. His pride was warring with his fear. And for a man like Preston Ashford, pride typically won until the very last second. He jutted his chin out, his eyes darting between me and Sterling, measuring the threat level. He was searching for the weakness, the daughter he could bully. "Sit down, Preston," I declared. I did not raise my voice. I simply stated it as an inevitability. He ground his teeth, a muscle in his jaw jumping, but he sat. He withdrew the chair in with a sharp scrape against the floor. He positioned his elbows on the table and clasped his hands, creating a barricade. "Let us cut the theatrics," he declared, his voice struggling to locate its usual booming resonance. "So, you purchased the note? Fine. You obviously possess some money now. You desire to experience importance. You desire to dangle this over our heads to make a point about, what, respect?" He scoffed, a dismissive sound that was meant to belittle me. "We are family, Reverie," he declared, regaining some of his bluster. "And because we are family, we require a reasonable plan. We are not going to be extorted. You cannot treat your father like a common debtor. I expect, no, I demand, that we restructure this immediately, interest-free, with a grace period until the boutique stabilizes. That is the only fair solution." He was issuing orders. He was sitting at a table I controlled, consuming air in a room I financed, discussing a debt I owned, and he was still issuing orders. I rotated my gaze to Vivian. She had collapsed into her chair, appearing smaller than I had ever perceived her. The golden child's shine was gone, replaced by the dull mat of exhaustion and fear. But as she observed me, really observed my suit, my watch, the manner Sterling deferred to me, her fear began to mutate into something else. It transformed into indignation. She perceived the wealth, she perceived the power, and she hated me for it. "You possess money," she whispered. Her voice was trembling but gaining volume. "You possess genuine money," she observed Thatcher, then back at me. "You permitted me to suffer," she accused, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. "You recognized I was drowning. You recognized I could not pay the rent. You recognized I was losing staff, and you merely sat in your high tower and observed." Vivian, I declared calmly. No. She slammed her hand on the table. The silverware rattled. Why do you have to make a scene? You could have merely written a check. You could have merely paid it off if you are so rich. But no, you had to do this. You had to purchase the debt so you could humiliate us. You are sick, Reverie. You are jealous and you are sick. The entitlement was breathtaking. In her world, my resources were automatically her resources. My success was only valid if it served her requirements. I reclined in my chair, interlacing my fingers. I observed the three of them. The mother who forged, the father who bullied, and the sister who consumed. I possess a question, I declared. The quietness of my voice cut through Vivian's rant like a razor. I observed Cordelia, then Preston, then Vivian. Do you assume I require you? I inquired. Or do you assume you require me? The question suspended in the atmosphere. Preston scoffed again. Do not be ridiculous. We are your parents. You will always require us. You crave our approval. That is what this whole stunt is about. I shook my head slowly. No, I declared. I do not require you. I do not require your approval. I do not require your love because I realized a long time ago that what you call love is merely a transaction I can never afford. I motioned to the black binder in front of Sterling. But you, I declared, you require me because right now I am the only thing standing between you and total ruin. Sterling, proceed. Sterling Mercer opened the folder. He did not do it aggressively. He did it with the precise, methodical movement of a coroner pulling back a sheet. He extracted a single document, the notice of default and acceleration, and slid it across the table toward Preston. Mr. Ashford, Sterling declared, his tone purely professional. You seem to be laboring under a misapprehension regarding the nature of this meeting. Preston glared at the paper without touching it. We are here to negotiate terms. Sterling shook his head. No, sir. We are not here to negotiate terms. We are here to inform you of the reality of your position. Sterling positioned a second document on the table. It was the asset seizure schedule. Ironwood Capital LLC is not a family trust, Sterling declared. It is a private equity vehicle, and as of yesterday, Vivian's Atelier Bridal is in total default. We are not searching for a payment plan. We are exercising our right to accelerate the full balance of the loan. $620,000, I declared. Payable immediately. Preston's face transformed a violent shade of purple. You cannot do that. It is unconscionable. We possess rights. You possess nothing, Sterling interrupted, his voice sharpening. You possess a lease that is 3 months in arrears. You possess inventory that is unpaid for. And you possess a creditor who is weary of waiting. Vivian started to weep, placing her face in her hands. Mother, do something. Inform her to stop. Cordelia observed me, her eyes wide and wet. Reverie, please be reasonable. We cannot pay that. You recognize we cannot pay that. Why are you doing this? Is it because of Thanksgiving? Is it because of what your father declared? I am sorry. Okay? We are sorry. Just stop this. It was the first occasion I had heard the word sorry in that residence in 20 years. But it was not an apology. It was a bargaining chip. I observed my mother. It is not about Thanksgiving, Cordelia. Then what is it? She pleaded. We are family. Sterling cleared his throat. The sound was loud in the small room. He reached into the second binder, the one I had labeled the nuclear option in my mind. But he did not open it yet. He merely rested his hand on the cover. Mr. Ashford, Mrs. Ashford, Sterling declared. Before you invoke the word family again, I suggest you observe the document in front of you very carefully, because my client is not operating as your daughter tonight. She is operating as the individual whose name is on that loan. Preston observed up, confused. We recognize her name is on the loan. She is the guarantor. That is why we are here. No, I declared. I inclined forward, my chest pressing against the edge of the table. I locked eyes with Preston. I am not the guarantor because I agreed to be, I declared. I am the guarantor because someone in this room decided that my name was a piece of public property. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Preston stopped breathing. Cordelia went perfectly still, like a deer hearing the snap of a twig. Vivian lifted her head from her hands, her mascara smeared, her eyes darting to her mother. Sterling tapped the binder under his hand. "We are not here to discuss a payment plan for a legitimate loan," Sterling declared. "We are here to discuss the fact that Ironwood Capital has acquired a debt instrument that was secured through felony identity theft, wire fraud, and forgery." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a heart stopping. Preston opened his mouth but closed it. He observed the binder under Sterling's hand. He observed the confident set of my shoulders. And for the first time, the arrogance vanished. In its place was the terrified realization that he had walked into a trap from which there was no exit. I did not blink. "You desired a meeting with the bank," I declared softly. "You possess one." The atmosphere in the private dining room seemed to solidify, transforming into a substance so thick it was difficult to breathe. Sterling Mercer's words suspended between us like a suspended guillotine blade. "You are meeting with Reverie." Preston stared at me. His face, typically a mask of arrogant certainty, was undergoing a slow, painful disintegration. He observed from me to the legal binder, then back to me, attempting to reconcile the daughter he had dismissed as a failure with the creditor, who now held his fate in her hands. "Do you own Ironwood?" he stammered. The booming baritone was gone, replaced by a thin, reedy rasp. "That is impossible. You do not possess that variety of capital. You are a technician. You repair computers." Sterling did not permit me to answer. He inclined forward, his voice stripping away the last shreds of their delusion. "Ms. Ashford is the founder and majority shareholder of 2 major automation firms," Sterling declared, his tone clinically precise. "Her net income last year exceeded $25 million. She purchased your non-performing loan 2 days ago via a wire transfer that did not even trigger a liquidity warning on her accounts. She is not a technician, Mr. Ashford. She is the bank. $25 million. The number hit the room like a physical blow. Vivian gasped, a sound that was half sob, half shriek. Cordelia's hand flew to her mouth, covering a tremor that was rapidly spreading to her entire body. Preston's face flushed a violent, ugly red. The shock was rapidly replaced by a surge of defensive rage. He slammed his hand onto the table, making the water glasses jump. "This is a setup," he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You did this on purpose. You purchased this debt to humiliate us. You are doing this out of spite because of what I declared at Thanksgiving. This is nothing but a petty, vindictive revenge trip," he observed Sterling, attempting to locate an ally in the other man in the room. "This is predatory. She is utilizing insider information to destroy her own sister. I will not stand for it. I will sue you for bad faith practices." I remained perfectly still. I did not flinch at his shouting. I did not raise my voice. I simply waited for him to run out of breath. When he finally stopped, panting slightly, I spoke. "It is not revenge, Preston." I reached out and flipped open the second binder, the one Sterling had maintained closed until this moment. I spun it around so it faced them. "I purchased the debt because my name is on it," I declared, "and I never signed it." I observed the color drain out of Preston's face. It happened instantly, like a light switch being flicked off. He observed down at the document on top of the pile. It was the forensic analysis of the signature. Cordelia released a low moan. She shrank back in her chair, appearing small and withered. "We required to," she whispered. Her voice was trembling. "Reverie, you have to comprehend. It was for the family. Vivian required the money, and your credit was the only way. We were going to pay it back. We never meant for you to discover." "You never meant for me to discover," I repeated, my voice dropping to a chill whisper. "You stole my identity, Cordelia. You forged my signature. You utilized a friend from church to notarize a counterfeit document. That is not a family misunderstanding. That is a felony." Cordelia burst into tears. It was a terrified, weeping sound. She observed Preston, then at Vivian, desperate for someone to inform her it was not true. "But we are family," she cried, reaching across the table as if to touch my hand. I withdrew sharply. "You are my daughter. Mothers and daughters assist each other. I signed it because I recognized you would desire to assist your sister if you were not so difficult." I observed the woman who had given birth to me. Even now, caught in the act of a crime, she was blaming me. She had forged the signature because I was difficult. Sterling extracted a sheet of paper from the binder. According to the affidavit from the handwriting expert, the signature is a clumsy simulation. Sterling read aloud. And according to the investigator's interview with Dorothy Whitmore, the notary admitted that she did not witness Reverie signing the document. She stated that Cordelia Ashford brought the papers to her residence and assured her that Reverie had given verbal consent. Sterling observed over his glasses at Cordelia. "That is conspiracy to commit bank fraud, Mrs. Ashford. In the state of Georgia, that carries a prison sentence of up to 10 years. Vivian, who had been staring at the table, suddenly snapped. She observed up, her eyes red and wild. "Stop it," she screamed. "Just stop it." She observed me with a hatred so pure it was almost impressive. "So what? So Mother signed it. Who cares? You possess 25 million." She stood up, inclining over the table, her bracelets jangling. "You are rich, Reverie. You are filthy rich, and you are sitting here threatening Mother with jail over a stupid signature. Why did you not merely pay it? Why did you not merely write the check and save the boutique? You could fix this in 5 minutes. You are my sister, and you are observing me burn because you are too selfish to share." I observed Vivian. I observed the entitlement that had been fed and watered by my parents for 30 years. She genuinely believed that my money was her safety net. She believed that her failure was my responsibility to fix. I stood up slowly. I was taller than her in my heels, and for the first time, I experienced infinitely larger than all of them. "I am not observing you burn, Vivian," I declared. "I am observing you face reality." I walked around the edge of the table until I was standing right next to her. She flinched, but she did not back down. "You inquire why I did not save you?" I inquired softly. "Because you do not require saving. You are a 30-year-old woman who started a business on debt you could not afford, utilizing a name that was not yours. You do not require a bailout. You require learning what the word consequence means." I rotated to Preston. "And you," I declared. "You instructed me to find myself on the pavement. You informed the entire family I was homeless. You attempted to destroy my reputation so that when this loan inevitably collapsed, nobody would believe me. You were not protecting the family. You were setting me up to take the fall." Preston set his jaw. He was cornered. But he was an attorney. He was searching for an angle. "You cannot prove that," he snarled. "That is speculation. And as for the signature, I can argue implied agency. I can argue that you gave verbal authorization and are now recanting. It is your word against ours. And if you assume a jury is going to convict a mother for attempting to assist her daughter, you are delusional. I will countersue you for misappropriation of a debt instrument. I will paint you as a predatory vulture who purchased her own family's debt to torture them." He observed Sterling, a sneer forming on his lips. "Go ahead. Sue us. It will require years. And in the meantime, Reverie's reputation will be dragged through the mud just as much as ours." Sterling sighed. He observed me and gave a small nod. It was time for the final nail. "Mr. Ashford," Sterling declared. "We anticipated you might take that route." Sterling reached into his laptop bag and extracted a small flash drive. He positioned it gently on the table. "We possess a recording," Sterling declared. Preston froze. "What recording?" "It was taken yesterday," Sterling declared. "In your kitchen. It captures a conversation between you and your wife regarding the loan." Sterling tapped a key on his laptop, which was connected to the room's speaker system. Preston's voice filled the room, loud and clear. "She will not sue, Cordelia. She does not possess the stomach for court." Then Cordelia's voice, cold and calculating. "I am not worried about her suing. We merely have to hold the line. After 2 months, It is too late for her to complain. She is not going to send her own mother to jail. Sterling hit the stop button. The silence that followed was heavier than anything that had come before. It was the silence of a tomb. Preston stared at the speaker. His mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. He recognized, as an attorney, he recognized exactly what that meant. It proved intent. It proved knowledge of guilt. It proved that there was no implied agency. It was a confession. And we also possess the email logs, Sterling added, sliding one last piece of paper across the table. The emails where Vivienne informed the loan officer that Reverie possessed anxiety and could not come to the bank. It destroys your narrative that Reverie was involved. Sterling reclined. So, Mr. Ashford, you can sue us. You can claim implied agency, and we will play that recording for the judge, the jury, and the state ethics board that governs your law license. Preston slumped back in his chair. The fight went out of him like air departing a balloon. He appeared old. He appeared defeated. He observed Cordelia, who was weeping silently into her napkin. "What do you desire?" Preston whispered. I sat back down at the head of the table. "I desire this over," I declared. Sterling opened the first binder, the civil file. "We have prepared a settlement agreement," Sterling declared. "It offers you two choices." He held up one finger. Choice 1. Ironwood Capital exercises its right to immediate foreclosure. We seize the inventory, the equipment, and the leasehold. We liquidate everything to satisfy the debt. We also file the criminal report for fraud and forgery against all three of you. Cordelia released a sob. Sterling held up a second finger. Choice 2. You sign a voluntary surrender of collateral. You turn over the keys to the boutique to Ironwood Capital within 72 hours. You sign a confession of judgment regarding the debt, admitting to the forgery. In exchange, Ironwood agrees not to file criminal charges, provided the debt is satisfied through the liquidation of the business assets. And there is one more condition, I added. I observed all of them. You will sign a non-disparagement agreement. You will retract the lies you informed the church and the family about me being homeless. You will write a letter, approved by my attorney, stating that Reverie Ashford is a successful business owner who attempted to assist the family, and that any rumors to the contrary were false. Preston observed the papers. Surrender the boutique? He inquired weakly. But that is Vivienne's entire life. No, I declared. That is the life you stole for her. It is gone. The only question now is whether you desire to lose the boutique or lose your freedom. Vivienne observed me, her eyes pleading. Reverie, please. You cannot take the boutique. It is my dream. You should have dreamed cheaper, I declared. I observed the clock on the wall. You possess 72 hours, I declared. That is 3 days. I stood up. I did not wait for them to answer. I did not wait for them to beg. This is not a negotiation, I declared. This is an eviction notice. I walked to the door. Sterling began packing up the binders. And one last thing, I declared, rotating back to observe them huddled around the table. Do not assume I am doing this to win. I already won. I won the day I departed your residence 10 years ago. I am doing this so that you never ever assume you can utilize my name as a shield again. From now on, I declared, my voice hard as diamonds, I am not your daughter. I am not your sister. I am your creditor, and I expect to be paid. I opened the door and walked out into the cool night atmosphere of the corridor. I could hear Vivienne sobbing behind me, a sound of utter despair. But as I walked toward the exit, I did not experience guilt. I experienced lighter. I experienced like a heavy coat had finally been removed from my shoulders. I walked past Thatcher, who was standing in the corridor appearing pale. He nodded to me, an expression of respect and perhaps a little fear. I nodded back. It was done. The truth was on the table, stamped, recorded, and undeniable. Now all that remained was to observe the house of cards fall. The 72 hours following the dinner at Magnolia and Stone were the quietest 3 days of my life. I expected a barrage of phone calls. I expected Preston to scream into my voicemail. threatening to sue me for everything from elder abuse to emotional distress. I expected Vivian to appear at my building, demanding to be permitted in so she could scream at me in person. But there was nothing. The silence was not peaceful. It was heavy, like the atmosphere before a tornado touches down. It was the silence of individuals who had finally realized that the walls were not merely closing in. They were already crushed. My phone did light up occasionally, but the messages were pathetic, disjointed attempts to test the waters. Reverie. We should converse without the attorneys. Preston texted on Friday morning. Please just answer the phone. Vivian sent on Friday evening. I did not reply. I sat in my office at Prism Logic, observing the code for a new shipping protocol scroll across my monitor. But my mind was entirely focused on the clock ticking down. I had provided them a deadline. Sunday evening at 6 Mo. If the papers were not signed by then, Sterling Mercer would file the criminal complaints on Monday morning. On Saturday afternoon, the silence broke in a manner I had not anticipated. My concierge contacted up to my unit. Ms. Ashford, there is a Mrs. Cordelia Ashford in the lobby. She declares she is your mother. She declares it is urgent. I hesitated. My initial instinct was to instruct him to send her away, but curiosity, cold and sharp, got the better of me. I desired to perceive what card she possessed left to play. Send her up, I declared. When Cordelia stepped off the elevator, she appeared 10 years older than she had at the restaurant. Her perfect hair was slightly flat, her makeup applied with a shaking hand. She held her purse tight against her stomach like a shield. I did not offer her a beverage. I did not invite her to sit on the Italian leather sofa. I stood by the kitchen island, arms crossed, waiting. I am not here to fight, Reverie, she declared, her voice trembling. Then why are you here? I inquired. The deadline is tomorrow. Cordelia observed around my apartment. She absorbed the floor-to-ceiling windows, the modern art, the undeniable evidence of a wealth she could not comprehend. We can fix this, she declared softly. We do not require the attorneys. We do not require the police. She reached into her purse and extracted a folded document. It was old, yellowed at the edges. This is the deed to the beach residence, she declared, positioning it on the marble counter. And my jewelry. The pearls, the diamond brooch your grandmother left me. I desire you to possess them. I stared at the papers. The beach residence was a small, dilapidated cottage on the coast that Preston had leveraged and refinanced 3 times. The jewelry was valuable sentimentally, perhaps, but financially it was negligible compared to the debt they owed me. What is this, Cordelia? I inquired. It is your inheritance, she whispered. I am providing it to you now. All of it. In exchange for dropping this, just permit the loan go. Write it off as a loss. You possess so much money, Reverie. You will not even miss it. Accept the residence, accept the jewelry, and permit your sister maintain the boutique. I observed her, and I experienced a wave of nausea. She was attempting to bribe me. She was attempting to purchase my silence with the scraps of the family estate. She truly believed that everything in life was a transaction, that even justice could be bartered for a few strings of pearls and a mortgaged cottage. You assume this is about money, I declared, pushing the deed back toward her. You still do not get it. It is about family, she cried, tears welling in her eyes. I am attempting to maintain this family together. I declared, you are attempting to purchase a clean conscience. You are attempting to pay me off, so you do not have to admit that you committed a crime against your own daughter. I retrieved the deed and held it out to her. I do not desire the residence, Cordelia. I do not desire the jewelry. I do not desire anything that comes from you. I earned $25 million last year. I can purchase the entire coastline if I desire to. I do not require your handouts. She stared at me, the paper trembling in her hand. Then what do you desire? She whispered. I desire the truth, I declared. And since you cannot provide me that willingly, I am going to extract it legally. Go home. I will perceive you at Sterling's office tomorrow. She departed, defeated, clutching her useless bribe. Sunday morning brought a text from Thatcher. It is over, he wrote. The suppliers came for the machines yesterday. Vivian attempted to stop them, but they possessed the lien paperwork. She is a wreck. She finally informed Preston she desires to sign. She declares she cannot take the fear anymore. I experienced a grim satisfaction. The pressure had worked. At 5 on Sunday, I walked into Sterling Mercer's office. It was a stark contrast to the restaurant. There was no food, no mood lighting, no pretense of social niceties. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The conference table was bare except for 5 stacks of documents, each flagged with "Sign Here" stickers. My family was already there. They sat in a row on one side of the table, appearing like prisoners awaiting sentencing. Preston was slumped in his chair, staring at his hands. Cordelia was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. Vivienne appeared hollow, as if the last 3 days had scooped everything inside her out. Sterling sat at the head of the table. He nodded to me as I entered. I assumed the seat opposite them. I did not declare hello. "Let us proceed," Sterling declared. He pushed the first document toward Vivian. "This is the confession of judgment," Sterling explained. "By signing this, you admit that the signature on the loan documents dated October 14th, 2022, was not Reverie Ashford's signature. You admit that you possessed knowledge of this fact and benefited from the fraud." Vivian observed the paper. Her hand shook as she retrieved the pen. "I did not mean for it to go this far," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I merely required the money, and Mother declared she would handle it." "Stop," I declared. Vivian observed up at me. "Do not blame Mother," I declared. "You are 30 years old. You perceived the loan documents. You perceived my name. You recognized I was not there. You recognized I did not sign it. You permitted it happen because it was convenient for you. You were content to utilize my credit as long as it purchased you your dream." Vivian dropped her head. Tears dripped onto the mahogany table. "I am sorry," she choked out. I did not offer forgiveness. I merely pointed to the signature line. "Sign it." She signed. The scratching of the pen was the only sound in the room. Sterling accepted the paper and slid the next document toward Preston and Cordelia. "This is the voluntary surrender of collateral and the release of liability," Sterling declared. "This transfers all assets of Vivian's Atelier Bridal to Ironwood Capital LLC for immediate liquidation. It also includes a clause where you, Preston and Cordelia Ashford, admit to facilitating the unauthorized use of Reverie Ashford's identity." Preston observed up. His eyes were dull. "We did it for the family, Reverie," he croaked. "You have to comprehend. We were merely attempting to assist your sister," Sterling cut in, his voice like a whip. "Mr. Ashford, I will remind you that for the family is not a legal defense against fraud. If you utter that phrase one more time, I will recommend my client withdraw this settlement offer and proceed with the criminal filing." Preston closed his mouth. He observed the document. He observed me. "You are ruining us," he declared bitterly. "No," I declared. "I am permitting you ruin yourselves. I am merely refusing to pay the bill." Preston signed. He pressed the pen down so hard the paper nearly tore. Cordelia signed next, weeping silently the entire time. Sterling gathered the papers. Then he extracted the final document, a single sheet of paper. "This is the retraction and apology," Sterling declared. He slid it toward Cordelia. "You will sign this," I declared. "And then you will make copies. You will send one to the pastor of Providence Fellowship Church. You will send one to the head of the prayer circle. And you will post the text on your social media accounts for 30 days. Cordelia read the paper. Her face went white. "I, Cordelia Ashford, formally retract my previous statements regarding my daughter, Reverie Ashford. The rumors that she is homeless, destitute, or financially unstable were false. Reverie is a successful business owner who attempted to assist our family. Any financial difficulties currently facing the Ashford family are of our own making." "I cannot do this," Cordelia whispered. "The church, the neighbors, they will assume I am a liar." "You are a liar, Cordelia," I declared. I inclined across the table. "You were content to destroy my reputation to cover your crime. You informed the world I was a failure, so they would not suspect you were a thief. Now you are going to inform them the truth. But the humiliation, she pleaded, is the price of your freedom, I concluded. Sign it, or I contact the district attorney in the morning. Cordelia observed Preston. He rotated his face away. He could not save her. With a trembling hand, she signed the paper. She was sobbing openly now, mourning the death of her perfect public image. It was done. Sterling gathered the files into his briefcase. He checked the signatures one final time. Everything appears to be in order, Sterling declared. Ironwood Capital will take possession of the boutique keys immediately. The liquidation team arrives tomorrow morning at 8. I suggest you remove any personal items before then. I stood up. My family remained seated, broken and small. They appeared like strangers to me now. The bond was not merely severed, it was cauterized. I walked to the door. "Reverie!" Vivienne called out. Her voice was thin and desperate. I stopped, my hand on the doorknob. "What happens now?" she inquired. "What do we do?" I did not rotate around. "You figure it out," I declared, like I did. I walked out of the office and down the long corridor to the elevators. I stepped out of the building and into the cold night atmosphere of Savannah. The wind bit at my face, but it felt clean. It felt real. I extracted my phone from my pocket. I opened the family group chat, the chat where they had planned their dinners, shared their photographs of Vivienne, and ignored my existence until they required a victim. I typed one final message. From this moment on, my name is not a resource you are authorized to utilize. Do not contact me. Do not speak about me. We are done. I hit send. Then I went to the settings. I selected Leave Group. I selected Block Contact for Preston, for Cordelia, for Vivienne. I deposited the phone back in my pocket. I observed up at the skyline, at the lights of the city where I had constructed an empire from nothing. I was alone. Yes. But for the first time in 34 years, I was safe. I walked toward my vehicle, the sound of my heels clicking rhythmically against the pavement. I did not observe back. There was nothing behind me but a bad investment I had finally written off. Thank you so much for listening to this story of betrayal and justice. I would love to recognize where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening on your commute, at the gym, or relaxing at home? Please let me know in the comments below so we can connect. If you enjoyed Perceiving Reverie Take Back Her Power, please ensure to subscribe to our channel. Hit that like button and smash the notification button to assist this story reach more individuals who require hearing it.